Captain Elias Thorne gripped the railing of the observation deck, his knuckles paling against the worn alloy. The starship Endeavour hummed steadily beneath him, its familiar vibration as comforting as a heartbeat after years in the black. Beyond the viewport, the orbital station of Epsilon Eridani gleamed like a jeweled crown, docking arms reaching toward a chaotic fleet, sleek Krellian cruisers with iridescent hulls, blocky Vorath freighters crammed with refugees, and darting Tsari scouts. Comms chatter erupted in a babble of pleas for evacuation slots, drowned by urgent reports of wormhole instability from the core worlds. Elias glanced over his shoulder at Dr. Lena Vasquez, hunched over a console, her dark hair knotted back practically. She typed furiously, cross-referencing manifests with seismic data from the galactic rift. "They're panicking out there," she muttered without looking up. "The Krellians demand priority docking. Their fleets are tangled in border skirmishes. As if that matters when the rift could swallow half the sector." He nodded, voice steady. "Let them squawk. Orders are clear. Load what we can orderly and jump before instability hits." Elias embodied calm resolve, honed from 2 decades captaining human explorers through uncharted nebulae. No bluster, just quiet competence that won trust across a dozen worlds. Boots echoed from the corridor behind, Sergeant Kira Novak hauling a crate of medkits toward the cargo bay. Her muscular frame moved with efficient grace, United Terran Marine insignia on her sleeve. "Captain Doc, the Vorath delegates are jamming the airlocks again. Whole delegation plus half their trade goods. I suggested they prioritize civilians." "Politely." Lena snorted, leaning back from the console. "Politely?" Heard the translator glitch. The analytical one, sharp and wry, but her hands trembled faintly as she rubbed her temples. The rift's gravitational waves frayed nerves, admitted or not. Elias turned, arms crossed. "Handle it, Kira. No weapons, no raised voices. We're humans, we leave calmly. That's our edge." No need to elaborate, the adage was Terran spacer gospel. While empires buckled under bureaucracy and pride, humanity packed up, adapted, and slipped away without fanfare. Kira saluted crisply, a faint smile cracking her stern facade. "Aye, sir." "Calmly it is." She hefted the crate and vanished down the hall, her voice already intercepting wide-eyed Vorath merchants. Elias returned to the viewport as a Krellian cruiser nudged aggressively for position. Station alarms blared, another rift surge, spawning microfractures in spacetime. Debris flickered into being, a brief storm of ice and rock pinging off shields. The Endeavour shuddered in sympathy, but inertial dampeners held. Lena joined him, shoulder brushing his. "Room for 200 more. Mostly non-combatants from outer colonies. But the Tsari envoy insists on their sacred relic, a stasis pod eating half a shuttle bay. Prioritize lives," Elias said simply. "Relic waits for the next wave, if there is one." His eyes narrowed as a Vorath freighter vented plasma in frustration, nearly clipping a docking arm. Traffic control drowned in desperate overlap. She sighed, steel in her gaze. "You're right. This feels like the end of something vast. Empires held the core for centuries. Now they're scrambling like roaches." Elias placed a hand on her arm, grounding her. "We'll rebuild on the fringes. That's human grit, showing up where others shatter." No preaching, just fact from watching his people forge habitats from asteroids amid greater powers' wars. A proximity alert chimed. Kira's voice crackled. "Captain, problem?" Krellians sealed their cruiser to the station, overriding locks. Armed escort forcing in. Elias straightened, calm unbroken. "On my way." Lena, seal inner bays, prep jump drive. "Orderly exit just got messier." He strode purposefully toward the door, command's weight settling like an old friend. Empires might blaze in entitlement, but the Endeavour would slip away whole, carrying hope, one steady step at a time. Elena gripped the armrest of her command chair, the Odyssey's engines humming through the deck like a distant heartbeat. The view screen flickered with outer chaos, jagged debris from the shattered Krell battlecruiser tumbling in the void, plasma sparks arcing from ruptured hulls. Her crew, Jackson engineering, Mira at navigation, watched in tense silence as the alien armada shredded itself ahead. "Captain," Mira said, voice steady but cautious, rifts widening. Outer lane skirts the worst, but adds 2 hours to ETA. Elena nodded, fingers drumming the console. Brave meant calculated, not reckless. Lesson from freighter runs through pirate nebulae. 2 hours we can spare. Jack's core status? Last dodge shook us like a maraca. Jax's voice crackled, dry wit intact. Holding but grumbling. Dampeners whining like a kicked pup. 10 minutes to reroute power, we'll be golden. No black hole juggling, please. She smiled faintly. Jax, ever cautious, triple-checked everything, invoking Murphy in 0G. But his fixes had saved them countless times. Make it 8. Civilians in cryo won't thank us for a scrapyard wake-up. The plan, slip past the Vexor Empire's crumbling front line, sparked by their glassing of a neutral colony. Humanity's outposts withdrew calmly, methodically, while old powers devoured each other. No stands, no broadcasts, just quiet exits like back doors from burning casinos. Mira input coordinates, hands precise from blindfolded asteroid runs. The Odyssey, a retrofitted colony hauler, bore 300 souls and fragile hopes. Elena eyed the screen's clean blue arc threading hulks. Engaging thrusters, Mira announced. The ship surged, smooth then shuddering as a rogue shockwave rippled through. Alarms pierced the air. Elena's stomach nodded. Report. Shields at 60, Mira said, scanning readouts. Wave clipped us. Minor breach in cargo bay 3, sealed. Jax cut in urgent. Captain Worse here. Reroute overloaded secondaries. Losing AUX life support in 4 and 5. Vent and patch or cryopods cook. Elena's mind raced. Outer lane seemed clear per last evac intel. But war intel was politician reliable. Push risked pod failures mid-jump, families thawing to oblivion. Double back meant Vexor raiders. Options, she demanded, standing, bridge lights shadowing her face. One image haunted, a frost-cracked cryopod, occupant frozen in panic. Mira hesitated. Vent breach, emergency thrusters for debris boost. Risky, strains core, but shaves time. Jax snorted. Risky? Understatement of the century. Thrusters for emergencies, not rides. One spike we spin. Elena paced, deck cool under boots. Brave faced fire, not blind charges. Jax, isolate overload? By a window? Pause, tools clanking. Maybe. 3 minutes. But if that shockwave, it hit. The ship bucked, lights flickering, another pulse slamming home. Consoles sparked, Mira cursed, wrestling helm. Elena braced, metal groaning like warning. Conduits fried, Jax gasped. Life support dropping. 20 minutes before pods critical. The trajectory blinked red, warnings veining the screen. Elena's jaw set. Humanity's calm exit fractured here in forgotten space. No empires falling if they joined wreckage. Divert from non-essentials, she ordered. Mira plot boost. Jax, guide the patch as we go. No one left behind. As the Odyssey surged, engines straining chaos's tide, Elena felt resolve settle, not panic. The galaxy could burn, they'd thread or carve paths. Captain Alara Voss gripped the observation deck railing, knuckles whitening as stars streaked beyond the viewport. The Endurance thrummed with overtaxed engines, a sound as familiar as her heartbeat after a week. Below, Zirion's allied empire outposts smoldered like dying campfires, smoke curling through recyclers' futile scrub. They're not following, murmured Jax, her chief engineer, from the console. He wiped brow grease, cautious eyes flicking between scanners and chaos. The steady fixer, but his voice trembled now. Ilara nodded, tearing gaze from viewport. Evac plan. Load essentials, feint inner systems through orbital blockade, slip to uncharted fringes where empires frayed. But Zorathian enforcers, crumbling alliance remnants, anticipated, their lead cruiser clipping AUX thrusters, turning escape to limp retreat. Patch status, she asked, tone clipped, gut not hidden. Jax tapped panel, hesitating. Holding jury rigged. One more hit, we're debris. Reroute from life support to buy time. Lyra, diplomat squeezed in the corner, arms crossed. Her earnest face, usually negotiation bright, drew tight with worry. She pushed staying, one last Zarathian plea for shared survival amid collapse. Ilara overruled, humanity's grit cut losses. Divert hits refugees, Lyra said softly. Kids especially. Already scared. Ilara met her eyes, command heavier. 200 souls crammed aboard, humans betting on this arc as empires fractured, plagues from boardrooms, alliances shattering. Humanity left calmly, sans war cries. But calm wasn't easy. Proximity alarm blared, slicing tension. Jack swore, pulling feet. Zarathian cruiser loomed, scarred hull closing predatorily. Gaining, Jack said, fingers flying. Can't outrun. Ilara straightened, options racing. Feint backfired. Enforcers saw deserters hoarding resources, fuel, meds, human tech. She eyed the asteroid field ahead, jagged shield if timed right. Risky, better than surrender. Lyra comms. Broadcast manifest. No weapons, threats, just seekers of new starts. Voice steady, doubt flickered inside. Zarathian spared no mercy as worlds burned. As Lyra hurried off, Jax leaned in. If they don't buy? Improvise. Ilara flashed wry smile, masking fear. She punched intercom. All hands brace. Threading the needle. The Endurance banked toward asteroids, engines groaning. Debris pinged hull like hail, each impact thinning margins. Muffled cries rose from hold, but Ilara focused. Grit meant one choice at a time. Cruiser fired warning, beam vaporizing stray rock to dust. Heat bloomed shields, Jax's console sparked, slapped quiet. Shield 60. No more. Ilara hovered over evasion, calculating mentally. Dense labyrinth claimed bigger ships. But humans mapped worse. Hold course. Not falling today. Asteroids loomed, swallowing stars. New alert, internal. Power fluctuations hold. Lyra crackled, Captain calms down. Interference jamming maybe? Ilara's jaw tightened. Plan unraveling. Zirian flickered fresh fires below, empires self-devouring as they fled blaze. She glanced at Jax, grim nod, prying panel for reroute. Amid alarm roar, camaraderie solidified, shared resolve etching faces. They'd adapt or burn. Captain Ilara Voss gripped her command chair armrests, the Odysseus engines humming like a distant heartbeat. Bridge dim, lit by flickering stellar holograms and emergency red. Beside her, Engineer Kai Ren hunched at console, fingers dancing precisely, fusion cores rebuilt blindfolded. Across, Ambassador Lyra of Vexery Alliance paced, iridescent scales shifting blue to uneasy violet. Can't drift nebula, Lyra rasped melodically, cutting tension. Imperial fleets converging. Detection means slaughter. Ilara nodded, jaw set. Seen aliens panic, humans adapt too often. Kai, cloaking status? He wiped sweat, eyes down. Pushing Cap Nebula helps, but emitters overheat. We blaze on scanners. External hit hard. Core collapse from wormhole cascades ripping Empire supplies. Planets starved, fleets turned, refugees clogging jumps. Odyssey * human arc with outer rim evacuees, meant quiet slip. But plan, Nebula edge slingshot to neutral, backfired. Rogue destroyer forced deeper clouds. Sensors pinged debris, erratic signatures, skirmishes light minutes off. Ilara leaned, studying purple-gold holographic swirl. Clear path snaked, bottlenecked at particle storm. Options. Lyra halted, compound eyes narrowing. Hail Vexery outpost. My people owe tech trades. Escort us. Kai snorted, glancing up, with shielding grind. Alert every pirate. Escort, targets our hull. He's right, Ilara said, steady, gut nodded. Humans survived grit, quick fixes, not gestures. Improvise. Kai repurpose AUX thrusters? Vent plasma for derelict mimic? Kai's eyes lit, cautious, yielding to solver. Schematics overlaid nebula map. Risky. Purge coolant manually, 0 GEVA in soup. Wrong move, storm shreds. Lyra's scales deepened violet, patience fraying. Humans, manual, fixas. Dancing edges. Helada mit gaze. Better than hounds catching scent. Stood, decision habit. Suit up Kai. I'll coordinate. Lyra monitor vexury signals. South Polaris. As Kai toolkit to airlock, Ilara watched Nebula churn view screen. Maestro swallowing stars. Costs mounted. Synthesizers strained, unrest whispers below. One gamble, join void wreckage. In Nebula embrace, Kai floated, storm whipping suit like needles. Hut stark, densities spikes. Clipped hull, Odyssey fragile needle. Cap vent array. Holding heat warping seals. Ilara crackled calm. Steady. Align bypass purge on mark. Fingers numb gloved rerouted with torch welds. Ionized gust slammed, alarms, integrity 80. Teeth gritted, Kai pushed, endurance overriding fear. Bridge Lyra broke, contacts. 2 Imperial scouts, vectoring. Ilara clipped, Kai now. Purge triggered. Plasma bloomed vents, false decay gasp. Nebula diffused to static. Kai hauled to airlock, storm easing reluctantly. Cycling in Lyra urgent, working, they veer. But storm shifts. Path collapsing. Ilara exhaled, shadows long. Time bought, Nebula heart loomed, demanding more than tricks. Odyssey asterisk pressed, crew bound quiet resolve, empires fall shadowing. Captain Ilara Voss gripped the observation deck railing, knuckles whitening on cold metal as stars streaked viewport. Odyssey asterisk as engines hummed steady but stomach not persisted. Below Xerian alien armada shadows lengthened, biomechanical behemoths crushing 3 systems in months. Human outposts evacuated waves, but Krell Dominion merciless hive directives ashing planets. Captain, Lieutenant Marcus Hale cut tension knife-like. Cautious, double-checking manifests, vectors, sharp eyes scan tactical. Last shuttle away. 2,147 souls aboard, plus engineers sealing core. But Krell scout frigate closing, 2 light minutes, gaining. Ilara nodded, gazed to console. Brave pushed fear. Led Xerian mining 5 years, grit turning rock to hub. Now all left. Helm, slingshot gas giant. Gravity mask signature. Hale fleet, Admiral Reyes were buying time. Crew oiled machine, fingers holographic. Ensign Kira Novak, woody engineer sarcasm under fire, patched engine room. Face flickered, grease smeared, panels glowing. Captain rerouted baffles but lock makes ducks. Krell weapons shred shields. Bright ideas? Ilara thin smiled. Kira's barbs held morale. Working. Jury-rigged EMP array? Charm until not. Kira grinned fleeting. No quantum to bugs again. Ship lurched to gas giant clouds, Jupiter-kin storms moon swallowing. Alarms, Krell locking. Ilara raced mind. Dominion organic marvels, seed grown, neural nets humans cracking. Intel, disrupt relays, fleet stutters. Engineering, prep array wide burst, ordered. Target command node. Marcus, weapons, decoys on mark. Hale hesitated, cautious. Ma'am, miss means boarding. Civilians, families. I know. Steady eyes met. Blind run catches convoy. Hold here. Odyssey asterisk shuddered, alert screaming. Frigate materialized, tendrils maw unfurling. Torpedoes grazed, sparks deck dancing. Ilara braced bank, viewport gas giant banded fury, crimson gold eye staring. Decoys away. Hale shouted. Flares bloomed, drawing fire. Kira crackled, EMP charging 30. Steady. Heart engine rhythmed. Glimpsed memory, Xerian harvest, humans laughing alien suns, building lasting. Not today. Survival. Burst fired, silent ripple, devastating. Krell lights flickered, tendrils convulsed, net seized. Veered wild, slamming asteroid mine debris. Bridge silence, breaths ragged. We did, Hale murmured, disbelief softening. Ilara exhaled, relief souring. Scans, crippled, not destroyed, beacon pulsing armada. Kira, array overheat time? 10 tops. Venting plasma core breach. Captain straightened. Fleet 20 out, vulnerable. Exodus fraying. Intercept course. Not done. Odyssey asterisk accelerated, storms churning below. No easy space victories. Ilara glanced crew, faces quiet determined. Empire's firewakes, humans? Adapted desperate gambits. The dim auxiliary console glow flickered across Elena's face as she hunched over NAV charts, fingers tracing pursuer's erratic path. The Odyssey hummed strained, engines pushing void like weary final sprint. Marco wiped brow sweat, cautious eyes darting power readouts and sealed engineering door. Bleeding energy faster than patches, he muttered, rumble cutting hum. Last dodge shaved 10%. They close, they won't. Elena sharp, grit alive through 3 jumps. Straightened, braid pendulum swinging, punched new vector. Zara perched co-pilot edge, violet eyes unblinking, tendrils twitching unease. Krell Empire diplomat joined necessity, fleet's ash, war scattering, humanity's quiet exodus driver. Proximity alert blared, red pulsing bridge. Rival scavengers, Vorith clan remnants hungry for terraforming seeds, veered closer, hulking frigate BL odding out a distant star. Elena's early plan had been simple. Use the asteroid field's debris as cover, slingshot around a rogue moon to lose them. But the field's gravity wells were unpredictable, pulling harder than scans predicted. Now they were trapped in a tightening loop, the Odyssey's hull groaning under the strain. Options? Elena asked, not looking up. Her hands moved with practiced calm, rerouting auxiliary power to shields. She could feel the weight of it all. The seeds weren't just supplies, they were humanity's quiet bet on a new start, far from the empires crumbling in their wake. Losing them meant more than salvage, it meant erasing that fragile hope. Marco hesitated, his fingers hovering over the console. Cautious as ever, he ran the sims twice before speaking. We could vent plasma from the rear thrusters, fake a core breach, draw them in for the kill shot. But if it backfires? He trailed off, glancing at Zara. The alien species valued precision over risk. She'd argued against the initial evasion, pushing for negotiation even as Vorith raiders fired warning shots. Zara's tendrils stilled, then curled inward. Your ingenuity is admirable, Captain. But the Vorith do not parley with the fleeing. They see weakness. Her voice, translated through the ship's lingu module, carried a melodic lilt that softened the warning. Yet her gaze held steady, a spark of reluctant trust flickering there. In the chaos of the Empire's fall, she'd chosen the human steady departure over her own kind's desperate grabs for power. The frigate loosed a barrage, energy lances streaking past the viewport like fiery veins. The Odyssey shuddered, a direct hit glancing off the shields. Alarms wailed. Elena gripped the armrest, her mind racing. The plan was failing, the loop dragging them closer to the Vorith's guns. Marco prepped the vents. Zara, link into their comms, send a ghost signal, make them think we're hailing surrender. Marco's eyes widened. Surrender? That's a feint, Elena cut in, her wit flashing like a blade. They bite, we vent and blow past. Earned our way out before, we'll do it again. She met his gaze, the bridge's lights casting shadows that deepened the lines of exhaustion on her face. No speeches, just the raw edge of decision. As Marco nodded and dove into the controls, Zara extended a tendril to the comm panel, her form shimmering faintly under the strain. The signal went out, a fabricated plea, laced with static to mimic desperation. Tension coiled in the air, thick as engine grease. The Vorith frigate adjusted course, closing in like a predator scenting blood. Then, the loop's gravity yanked harder. The Odyssey listed, console sparking. Elena's heart pounded, but she held steady, watching the scopes. The frigate loomed larger, weapons priming. In that suspended moment, with empires falling silent behind them, the humans' calm exodus hung by a thread, clever adaptation or utter loss. Marco's vents hissed open, plasma blooming into the void like a false dawn. Zara's signal peaked, a digital lure. The frigate dove straight into the trap. Elena fired the improvised shot, a burst of redirected debris turning the plasma into a blinding inferno. The enemy ship veered wildly, shields flaring as they bought precious seconds. But the cost lingered. A power surge fried secondary systems, leaving the Odyssey as lights dimming, the path ahead shrouded in uncertainty. They broke free, but the war's echoes pursued, a reminder that leaving calmly came with scars. The dim glow of the auxiliary lights flickered across the control room, casting long shadows that danced like uneasy specters. Captain Ilara Voss gripped the edge of the console, her knuckles whitening as she stared at the holographic display. The Kalon Armada's signatures blinked closer, a swarm of predatory icons converging on the fringes of the nebula. Her crew, small, battered, but unyielding, huddled around her, their faces etched with the quiet resolve that had kept them alive through a dozen impossible retreats. "Status on the warp coils?" Ilara asked, her voice steady despite the knot in her gut. She didn't look up, she couldn't afford to show doubt now. Lieutenant Rao, the engineer with hands perpetually stained by conduit grease, wiped sweat from his brow. "Patching the overload, Captain. But the nebula's interference is playing havoc. It's like trying to thread a needle in a storm. Another hit from those disruptors and we're done." Private Lena Korsakov, the youngest among them, leaned against the bulkhead, her rifle slung over her shoulder like an old friend. She'd been a Marine fresh from the colonies when the evacuation began, all fire and untested grit. Now her eyes held a sharper edge. "They'll hit us before we clear the drift. We need a diversion, something to make them blink." Ilara nodded, her mind racing through the fragments of their plan. The Odyssey was no warship. She was a colony hauler, retrofitted for survival, her hull scarred from asteroid fields and hasty jumps. But humans didn't win by matching firepower, they won by thinking 3 steps ahead. "Rao, can we vent plasma from the secondary exhaust? Make it look like we're venting atmosphere, drawing them in close?" Rao's grin was fleeting, a spark in the tension. "Risky. Could fry our own sensors. But yeah, it might buy us time." The ship shuddered as another volley skimmed their shields, the alarms wailing in protest. Ilara felt the vibration through her boots, a reminder of how thin their margin had grown. The Empire's fall had left vacuums everywhere, rival fleets snapping at the heels of fleeing refugees like the Odyssey. For the Kalons it was sport, for her people it was everything. "Execute it," she said, straightening. "Lena, get to the turret. If they bite, make them regret it." Lena moved without a word, her steps quick and purposeful, the door hissing shut behind her. Ilara watched the display as Rao's fingers flew over the controls. The plasma vent fired, a brilliant azure plume erupting from the ship's flank, blooming like a false distress signal in the nebula's haze. The Kalon icons hesitated, then veered, predatory curiosity pulling them nearer. For a heartbeat, silence reigned in the control room, broken only by the hum of straining systems. Then the first enemy fighter broke through the cloud, its weapons hot and locking on. "Turrets live," Rao shouted. Ilara's breath caught as Lena's voice crackled over the comm. "Got eyes on 3. Firing." The Odyssey bucked under the recoil of the improvised railgun, a human-engineered beast that spat kinetic fury. The view screen flickered with the chaotic debris field ahead, shattered hulls of Krell warships twisting in the void, their Empire's once mighty fleet reduced to glittering scrap. Beside her, Tarak, the wiry Zorith engineer, tapped furiously at his console, his elongated fingers dancing over holographic controls. "The interference is worsening," he muttered, his voice a low rasp. "Their warp signatures are bleeding into our sensors. We can't plot a clean jump without risking a cascade failure." Across the bridge, Lena Ruiz, the ship's xenolinguist and Ilara's oldest friend, leaned against the navigation station, her face pale under the red emergency lighting. She'd always been the cautious one, the voice urging restraint amid the stars' endless perils, but now her eyes burned with quiet resolve. "We knew this was coming," she said, not looking up. "The Krell won't let us slip away. Not after we exposed their core world's instability." Ilara nodded, her jaw set. Humanity's exodus from the fractured galactic concord had been methodical, almost polite, diplomatic envoys withdrawing with handshakes and final transmissions, while behind them the alliances crumbled like dry sand. The humans had seen the fault lines, the Krell's aggressive expansion masking a decaying infrastructure, the Vexaries' espionage unraveling their own spies. But leaving calmly meant no scorched earth retreat, no vengeful strikes. Just departure. And now, in the shadow of the Krell's dying armada, that choice haunted them. A proximity alert blared, sharp and insistent. Tarak's console lit up with incoming signatures, 3 Krell interceptors, sleek predators cutting through the wreckage like knives. They're locking weapons, he warned. Shields at 60% from the debris hits. Ilara's mind raced. The initial plan had been simple. Skirt the edge of the battle's aftermath, use the debris as cover for a micro-jump to the neutral relay at Epsilon Verge. But the Krell's warp experiments had torn open rifts in space-time, turning the field into a gravitational minefield. Their first attempt had backfired spectacularly, slingshotting the Odyssey deeper into the chaos and shearing off a sensor array. Now, with fuel reserves dipping low and the crew nursing bruises from the turbulence, options narrowed. Lena, any chance of hailing them? By time? Ilara asked, her voice steady despite the knot in her gut. Lena shook her head, pulling up translation matrices. Their comms are jammed by the rifts. But I can try a burst signal, something to mimic their own protocols, make them think we're a damaged ally. Her fingers hesitated over the keys, the weight of it all pressing down. One wrong frequency and they'd draw the whole swarm. Tarak snorted, a Zorith gesture of grim humor. Or we improvise. I've been rerouting power to the auxiliary thrusters. If we vent plasma from the exhaust ports, it might mask our signature long enough to thread the needle through that narrow gap. He pointed to a flickering scan, a slim corridor between tumbling hulks, where the rifts pulsed like wounds in the fabric of reality. Ilara waited. Venting plasma risked overheating the core, but hiding in plain sight was human grit at its finest, turning weakness into deception. Do it. Lena, sync the signal. Make it convincing. As Tarak initiated the purge, a low groan echoed through the ship, the deck plates shuddering. Alarms wailed anew. One of the interceptors had broken through, its energy lance grazing their shields in a blaze of blue fire. The Odyssey bucked, sparks erupting from a nearby panel. Lena cursed in Spanish, slamming her fist on the console to stabilize the hail. Transmitting now, it's garbled, but it might fool them for a minute. The view screen showed the lead interceptor veering slightly, its sensors sweeping the plasma cloud billowing from the Odyssey's rear. Ilara held her breath, the bridge thick with tension. Seconds stretched into eternity. Then, the gap loomed ahead, a maw of jagged metal and swirling anomalies. Helm full burn, she ordered. Thread it. The ship surged forward, engines screaming as they wove between colossal fragments. A rift yawned to starboard, its pull yanking at the hull like invisible hands. Tarak braced against his station, sweat beading on his scaled brow. Holding, barely. Structural integrity at 85. Lena's voice cut through the din. Interceptors are breaking off, chasing the ghost signal. But the rifts are destabilizing. If we don't jump soon, we'll be pulled in. Ilara's hands tightened on the controls. They'd bought a fragile reprieve, but the cost was mounting. Another dent in their shields, a flicker of doubt in the crew's eyes. Humanity had left calmly, yes, but the Empire's fall dragged at their heels, relentless and unforgiving. As the Odyssey hurtled toward the relay's faint beacon, she wondered if calm could outlast the storm. The dim hum of the colony ship's engines vibrated through the deck plates, a steady reminder that they were still holding together. Elena wiped sweat from her brow, her fingers leaving a streak of grease across her forehead. The bridge was a cramped nest of consoles and flickering holograms, lit by the cold blue glow of emergency lighting. Marco hunched over the main panel, his tools scattered like fallen stars, muttering curses in Spanish under his breath. "She's fighting us every step," he said, not looking up as he yanked a conduit free. Sparks danced briefly, illuminating the worry lines etched deep into his face. The resource shortage had hit harder than expected. Fusion cells depleted faster than their models predicted, all because the alien overseers had skimped on the alloys during construction. Now, with half the fleet peeling away in panic, the strain was buckling their systems. Elena leaned against the bulkhead, her arms crossed, watching the viewport where the debris field loomed like a graveyard of shattered hulls. The rival Krell armada had ambushed them mid-exodus, their plasma lances carving through the outer escorts. It wasn't outright war, yet, but the message was clear. The empires wouldn't let humanity slip away without a fight. We knew they'd come sniffing. Question is, how long until they board us? Marco snorted, sealing the conduit with a hiss of sealant. Long enough if I can reroute the auxiliary power. But Elena, this ship's not built for evasion. We're a floating city, not a fighter. His hands trembled slightly as he worked, the cautious part of him screaming to turn back, to negotiate like the diplomats had urged. But Elena's resolve had pulled them this far, brave, unyielding, the kind of grit that made the crew follow her into the void. A klaxon blared suddenly, red lights pulsing across the bridge. Incoming transmission, the comms officer called from her station, her voice tight. The hologram flickered to life, resolving into the angular face of Vorik, the Krell commander. His mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement or threat, hard to tell with their kind. Human vessel, Vorik's voice grated through the speakers, translated imperfectly into a mechanical rasp. Your departure disrupts the balance. Surrender your core tech and we allow passage. Resist and your comm exit becomes a pyre. Elena's jaw tightened. She stepped forward, her reflection ghosting across the hologram. We've given enough to your balance. Humanity's done playing stabilizer for crumbling empires. Stand down or we'll show you why we left quietly. The transmission cut with a static snarl. Marco glanced up, eyes wide. Bluffing? We can't take them head-on. Not head-on, Elena replied, her mind racing through the schematics she'd memorized years ago. The early plan, slipped through the nebula's interference, had backfired when the Krell jammed their sensors. But there was another way, a human way. Improvise with what they had. Get me the salvage logs from the debris. We're turning their trash into our shield. As Marco dove back into the systems, pulling data feeds, the ship shuddered under a glancing plasma hit. Alarms wailed, but Elena ignored them, sketching rough vectors on a datapad. The crew moved like a single organism around her, petty officer hauling cables, navigator plotting blind jumps. Tension coiled in the air, thick as the smoke starting to curl from a vent, but no one faltered. This was their stake, not just survival but proving that leaving wasn't retreat, it was the first step toward something unbreakable. Vorik's fleet closed in, their wedge formation slicing through the stars. Elena's adaptation took shape, jury-rigged drones loaded with volatile debris and slaved to the ship's tractors. Not weapons exactly, more like a swarm of angry bees designed to foul engines and blind targeting arrays. Launch on my mark, she ordered, her voice steady amid the chaos. The first wave erupted from the bays, a glittering cloud that bloomed into the void. Krell interceptors veered, firing wildly, but the debris chain reacted, blooming into EMP bursts that rippled across their shields. One cruiser listed, its lights flickering out like a snuffed candle. Marco whooped from his station, the cautious engineer momentarily forgotten in the rush. It's working. Power surge contained, we've got 30 minutes clear. But as the path opened, a new alert pinged. Structural integrity at 40%. The cost was etching itself into the hull, a scar they'd carry into whatever came next. Elena watched the Empire's lights dim in their wake, a quiet unraveling, and felt the weight of it settle, not triumph yet, but the gritty promise of one. The dim hum of the auxiliary engines filled the cramped bridge, a steady vibration that seeped into Kira's bones like an unwelcome guest. She leaned over the console, her fingers dancing across the flickering holographic display, tracing the erratic paths of the debris field ahead. The Calith ship, once a gleaming predator of the void, now limped through the asteroid belt they'd chosen as their desperate sanctuary. Captain Elias stood behind her, arms crossed, his jaw set in that familiar line of quiet resolve. How much time before the Imperial scouts pick up our trail? He asked, voice low to avoid startling the others. Lena, the engineer, wiped sweat from her brow with the back of her hand, her coveralls stained with lubricant and regret. 2 hours, maybe less. Our signature's like a flare in the dark, human tech doesn't cloak like theirs does. She glanced at the readouts, the numbers climbing relentlessly. The Empire's armada had shattered their convoy weeks ago, leaving the Calith as the last bastion for the refugees crammed into its holds. But the real threat now was the belt itself, a graveyard of shattered moons, tumbling rocks that could punch through hull plating like paper. Kira straightened, her dark eyes narrowing at the scanner's warning pulse. Incoming fragment, bearing 047. Sizable, could shear us in half if we don't adjust. Elias nodded once, sharp and decisive, and she initiated the burn, thrusters firing in a controlled burst. The ship groaned, metal protesting as it veered. In the corner, young Theo clutched the armrests, his face pale but determined, whispering calculations under his breath. The kid's knack for patterns had saved them twice already. The fragment whipped past, close enough that the proximity alarm wailed briefly before Kira silenced it. Tension eased from Elias's shoulders, but only fractionally. We can't keep dodging forever. Lena, any chance of rigging the deflector to handle the density? Lena shook her head, frustration etching lines around her mouth. Power draws too high. One more hit like that and we're venting Atmo. Theo piped up then, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. What if we use the cargo drones? Repurpose them as buffers, launch a chain to clear a path. Elias met the boy's gaze, a spark of approval lighting his weathered features. Risky, but clever. Kira plotted. Lena, make it happen. As they scrambled into motion, the belt's shadows deepened outside the viewport, a silent promise of the Empire's inevitable pursuit. The Caliph pressed on, its human crew weaving survival from scraps, one calculated gamble at a time. The dim glow of emergency lights flickered across the bridge, casting long shadows that danced like specters over the consoles. Elena gripped the armrests of her chair, her knuckles white against the worn leather. The Odyssey shuddered again, a deep groan echoing through the hull as another micrometeorite grazed the shields. They were down to the last auxiliary power cell, and the alien fleet's debris field was closing in like a noose. Status, Marcus? She asked, her voice steady despite the knot in her stomach. She could feel the weight of every soul aboard, 2,000 colonists packed into cryopods below decks, trusting her to get them clear. Marcus wiped sweat from his brow, his fingers flying over a jury-rigged panel. Wires snaked across the floor like veins, connecting scavenged parts from the engineering bay. Shields at 12%. That last hit fried the secondary emitters. But I've got a workaround, rerouting the main drive's plasma flow to boost the field. It'll cost us speed though. We might not outrun the fallout from their battle. Lila hovered behind him, her cautious eyes scanning the readouts. She adjusted her glasses, a habit from the old days on Earth, and pointed to a spiking anomaly. If we do that, the core temperature will climb. We're already pushing limits. One surge and we vent atmosphere. Her words were measured, but the tremor in her hand betrayed her fear, not for herself but for the fragile lives depending on their choices. Elena nodded, absorbing it all. The view screen showed the chaos beyond, the remnants of the Crothian armada, shattered hulks tumbling in the void, their empire's hubris reduced to glittering scrap. Humans had warned them, back when diplomacy was still an option. Pull back from the border skirmishes or the chain reaction would consume them. But the Croth had laughed, their bioships pulsing with arrogant energy. Now, as the Odyssey threaded the needle through the wreckage, humanity's exodus felt less like flight and more like a quiet withdrawal from a war not theirs to fight. Implement it, Elena decided. We can't afford to drift. Plot a course for the outer jump point, evasive pattern delta. Marcus hit the controls and the ship lurched forward. Alarms blared as the plasma reroute kicked in, the deck plates humming with unnatural vibration. For a moment it worked. The shields flared brighter, deflecting a cluster of debris that would have torn them apart. Then the backfire hit. A sharp crack split the air, followed by the acrid smell of burning circuits. Sparks erupted from the panel, and Marcus dove back, cursing under his breath. Overload. The flow's destabilizing, its feedback into the cryo systems. Lila was already moving, pulling up diagnostics on her tablet. Pods 3 through 7 are warming. If we don't isolate, we'll lose half the colonists to thaw failure. Her face paled, but she didn't hesitate, barking coordinates into the intercom for the auxiliary team below. Elena unstrapped, her boots thudding against the tilting deck as she crossed to Marcus. Options. He grinned through the pain of a singed arm, that witty spark undimmed. Always one more. We vent the excess plasma through the auxiliary thrusters, turn the overload into a burst. It'll give us a slingshot past the densest debris, but we'll blind the sensors for a minute. Blind and fast. Risky, Lila interjected, her voice tight as she cross-checked the math. One wrong vector and we clip a fragment. But it's our shot. Elena met their eyes, the bridge a cocoon of urgency around them. No speeches, no dramatics, just the raw trust forged in 100 crises since leaving Seoul. Do it. Lila, monitor the pods. Marcus, make it count. He nodded, hands steady now as he patched the lines. The ship bucked like a wild thing, thrusters firing in a brilliant azure plume that lit the void. Debris whipped past, close enough to scrape paint, but they surged through, the Odyssey a needle in the storm. As the sensors cleared, the jump point loomed, a stable rift, humanity's gateway to unclaimed stars. But the cost lingered. Pod malfunctions had claimed a dozen lives, their vitals flatlining in silent tribute. Elena watched the readouts, jaw set. They'd make it, but the Empire's fall had carved its mark, not in glory but in the quiet ache of survival. The rift swallowed them whole, stars stretching into hyperspace's calm embrace. Behind, the galaxy churned on, empires crumbling in the wake of what humans had foreseen and forsaken. Captain Ilara Voss gripped the armrests of her command chair, the hum of the Endeavor's engines vibrating through the deck like a distant heartbeat. The view screen flickered with the chaotic light of the collapsing Zorathian fleet, hulks of once mighty dreadnoughts twisting into fireballs, their energy shields failing under the onslaught of their own redirected plasma storms. Humanity's gambit had worked, but at what price? The bridge crew moved with quiet efficiency, faces etched with exhaustion, their earlier banter silenced by the weight of survival. Status on the evacuation shuttles? Ilara asked, her voice steady despite the ache in her chest. Lieutenant Reyes, ever the cautious one, tapped his console without looking up. All accounted for, Captain. Last group docked 10 minutes ago. But the warp core's at 80% integrity, another hit like that and we're done. She nodded, eyes fixed on the sensor readouts. The Zorathians had underestimated human adaptability, their rigid hierarchies crumbling against the improvised minefield of salvaged debris and jury-rigged EMP bursts. It wasn't brute force, it was the quiet calculus of engineers who'd spent weeks turning scrap into salvation. But the cost lingered in the empty seats around her. 6 crew lost in the initial ambush, their names a fresh scar on the manifest. Ensign Tarek, the witty newcomer who'd crack jokes to keep morale afloat during the endless repairs, leaned forward. Incoming hail from the Valiant, ma'am. Admiral Karan wants to know if we're joining the counteroffensive. Ilara allowed a small smile, the first in hours. Karan, the grizzled veteran from the old colony wars, had been skeptical of her plan at first. Too risky, too unorthodox. Now his fleet trailed in their wake, picking up the pieces. Tell him we're charting our own course. Humanity doesn't chase glory, we build what's next. As the Endeavor aligned for the jump to uncharted space, the stars blurred into streaks. Behind them, the Zorathian Empire fractured, alliances shattering like glass under the revelation of human resolve. No grand speeches echoed through the ship. Instead, Reyes shared a nod with Tarek, a silent pact forged in fire. They had left calmly, not in retreat, but in the deliberate stride of those who knew empires rose and fell, while humanity endured, one clever step at a time. The warp drive engaged with a soft whine, carrying them beyond the fray. In the quiet that followed, Ilara unbuckled her harness and stood, the bridge lights casting long shadows. The war wasn't over, but this chapter closed with a promise. Whatever came next, they'd face it together, tools in hand, unbroken.